everybody in YouTube land, Levi Clay back again for another question and answer session. Today I'm looking at a question asked by one of my patrons, but it's actually just kind of great transcription related FAQs, you might say, that I thought might be worth addressing in a video. So if I take a look at the question, we don't want to see cleaner up. Casper asks, thanks for checking out my transcription today. I'll move me out of the way. There we go. After having a few transcriptions under my belt, there are a few general questions that confuses me, and I thought they might be something you could answer in a Q&A video on YouTube or in our Patreon group. For those of you unfamiliar, my Patreon can be found below. Gets you access to our private Patreon group where we collectively work on transcriptions and the like. Good fun, well checking out. And he says, if you think it makes sense, of course. So the questions are, can you describe what is a ghost note? What is a grace note before the beat and a grace note on the beat? How do they relate, if at all? And to use what? Okay, we'll address that in a second. When to use a staccato note versus a note of shorter length plus a rest. This always confuses me. The choice seems arbitrary. Cool. And what's the difference between a legato slide and a position slide? When to use what, or are you always just using legato slides? I understand triplets, but how to count or use different groupings? For example, groups of 6. What's the value? Can such groups go across the bar? All excellent questions, so let's take a look at some of them. Let's just bring me back up so I can see what I'm doing. Right, so I'm over here in my Guitar Pro file, and I'm going to go under New, Clean. Just open something up. Okay, so we've got a file that we can work on. We don't need that. So if we take a look at the first question. The first question is, can you describe what is a ghost note? What is a grace note before the beat and a grace note on the beat? Now, a ghost note, if I pick up my guitar, when you think about the way we play the guitar, notes are definite. I'm in open G, so not really the best tuning to be doing this stuff in, but when I play... Now, rhythmically and dynamically, that's consistent. It's eighth notes, was a quarter at the start, but then eighth notes. Consistent. But dynamically, it's also consistent. All of the notes are of the same velocity, we might say. A ghost note would be when a note is so low dynamically that it's questionable whether it's intentional or accidental. So, as an example, if I'm playing something a little bit funkier, when you're looking at some of the notes you might deem to be so quiet that they might not be essential to the overall integrity of the piece, I guess would be a good way of looking at it. And ghost notes are indicated in Guitar Pro with brackets, and we can shortcut those in by, let's just put some notes in. So I can shortcut those in just by pressing the O key, and that will give me a ghost note. So realistically, those come in. I tend to put those in transcriptions when I'm transcribing something and it sounds like I hear a note there, but it might not really be there. I mean, a good example would be if you were to have something like that, where this note is really just the finger being placed on the string. He's not really picking the note, but I can definitely hear something there. I might put that as a ghost note like that. I can indicate that that's, I don't like my dynamics showing up. So this note will be very quiet now, look. Back to my mezzo forte. Now if we just highlight that bar, you can hear the difference. So it's not really serving masses of purpose. Grace notes, on the other hand, appoggiaturas and won't even bother. Let's just say grace notes. Too much beer at this time of night to be worrying about pronunciations of things. So realistically, an appoggiatura is a note. If you look at the classical sense, it's a note that technically takes up half of the value of the written note, and they're used as a form of ornamentation. So if you look at Baroque compositions, when moving, you'd often have a suspension. So if I were to play, here's a basic chord. It's not in a weird tuning. Now if I put a suspension in there, now it's very old hat to notate that with an appoggiatura. We would just write that as quarter note, 2/8 notes, and a quarter note. So that's old hat. That's why I don't really use those. These grace notes that start before the beat, though, essentially what we're talking about is Guitar Pro, and you can really hear the difference between these two things if I put in that. Just put slides between them. Versus now, in terms of the notation, you can see the difference. I always use the grace notes on the beat, because that's realistically how we play when we play the guitar. When it comes to when you're playing a phrase like those grace notes, they're on the beat, right? I'm 1, 2, 3, 4. We'd never really go 1, 2, 3, 4. It feels very weird to play it before the beat, and you can hear the difference between those two things. So here's the way I'd always notate it. Let's actually slow it down just so you can really hear the difference between these two things. Let's bring that down to 60. So here's our grace note starting on the beat. And here's the grace notes being before the beat. It's very weird to me, this idea of playing the note and then sliding to the note and landing with a note on the beat. It's generally not how we play them. To be fair, not masses of difference between the two. In terms of notation, I think they'd both be interpreted the same way by someone reading. So that answers those two questions, hopefully. Yeah, so to answer the last part of that question, where to use what, I'd always aim for the grace notes starting on the beat, just because I think they give a better representation of what the person is trying to play. Of course, when you understand the difference between them, shouldn't be difficult for you to get the right one. So, question 2. When to use a staccato note versus a note of shorter length plus a rest? This always confuses me. The choice seems arbitrary. Ha! Funny you should say that. The choice is pretty arbitrary. The thing is, let's bring me back so I can see. The thing is, when you're using staccato notes, like so, I can do that with Shift and 1. That gives me my staccato dots. This can be read or interpreted in lots of different ways, right? What you might see is this. You might see that. You might see this. You might see this. Yeah, being a bit ridiculous now. I say you might see this. You wouldn't ever see this. Put a double dotted. That should work. Yeah, you might see this. The point is, these are all kind of ways of writing the same basic thing, Might put staccato dots on them. I often will opt for this one though, for one simple reason. It puts less ink on the page. When the more ink you add, i.e. notes and rests, here, or especially here, the more that's involved for the reader. Whereas when I see this, I interpret that as play these notes, but cut them all dead short. Simple as that. So when it comes to writing more complicated rhythms, it's totally arbitrary. It's totally up to you, the transcriber. And as a transcriber, your job is to create something that can be read. It can be interpreted by the person who needs to read it. So it's really down to you to work out what you like the look of and what suits the reader. I guess, you know, there are lots of... a good example of a rhythm that you might see would be... You see this rhythm all the time. See that rhythm all the time. There's lots of ways that you can write that if it's staccato. You could write... This is probably what I'd opt for, because that uses the least information possible, right? But likewise, you might see someone write it like this. Take that, get rid of that 16th note, put a 16th note in there. Now everything is rhythmically consistent, i.e. we're only dealing in 16th notes. Now these are going to sound the same. Like, sound exactly the same. Now, worst way of writing it, though one might argue that this is kind of valid. I've got some reasons as to why it wouldn't be, but would be that same piece of information we had at the start, but with staccato dots. I don't know if Guitar Pro will interpret this correctly. But it's certainly not playing it as this. Okay, so I wouldn't opt for this rhythm myself, only because when we look at this, what you see here is a staccato dot being placed on a tied note, and in my mind there's this big kind of juxtaposition of understanding. I'm like, right, okay, so this note is played and it's held for through to the and of 2, but you also want it to be short. There's a dichotomy there. Those two things can't really coexist. So that, I would look at that and say that's the least ink that you could use. Though having said that, I mean, I guess one might argue that you could write it like that. That's going to work just as well. So this is lots of different ways of writing the same information. Like. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's move on to your next question. So your next question was, hopefully that answers that question. Your next question was, what's the difference between a legato slide and a position slide? When to use what, or are you always using legato slides? Cool, fair question. So the difference between a legato slide and a shift slide. Just notate that. Very, very, very simple this. A legato slide, as the name would imply, is smooth. It means, legato means smooth. So if I play the 7th fret on my guitar and play a legato slide to the next note, we have this. So if I notate that like that, that's how I'm going to play that. Play the right fret really, shouldn't I? The shift slide, on the other hand, is information that tells us when we are shifting. Now these, again, kind of less in favour. What that tells me is that this note and the following note are played on the same finger. So it's telling me to use a shift slide there. So if I want to execute the first bar, you have this. But the second bar would be this. It's just telling me where that position slide is happening. And a place where that might come in use, because I know you're thinking, but Levi, why would you ever use that? Right, so if we have, this actually ties in quite nicely with your next question. If I use sextuplets, a phrase that I'm sure you've seen before, something like that. If I play that, one wouldn't, but one might assume that this is played. Check my fingers. I'm in a weird tuning, aren't I? One might play that as this. Check, like I say, check the fingering. In fact, I'll move the microphone. Apparently I won't. Check my fingering. Because there's no real indication as to how this should be fingered. Now, I could clear this up for the person reading it by putting in a shift slide there and a shift slide there. What this now tells me is that I play the first 6 notes, I then shift position. Now that's a different thing to if I notated it with a legato slide, because the legato slide would give me, should really just hold the guitar, shouldn't I? The legato slide would give me it's tricky. I want to do full legato. So those are different things. Go for the shift slide, and again it's easy to notate, you're just pressing the S key to add a shift slide, legato slide. That's what we want to go for on that one. Hopefully that makes sense. Now the final question, I understand triplets, but how to count or use different groupings? Cool, good final question. So triplets make sense, and this is all a rhythmic thing. This is all about understanding how to subdivide the beat, and understanding the difference between what different groupings mean. If we have a pulse, we can subdivide this beat 1, 2, 3, 4 or 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that's 2 notes per beat. We could play it as triplets, 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4, and that's 3 notes per beat. We could play it as 4 notes, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E, and we could also do 5 notes. Da 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 da. I'm just counting hippopotamus, 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 hip. So it's a way to subdivide by 5. And 6s. Dagada 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 da. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a dagada 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 da. Could also do 7s, which would be dagada 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 da. Anti-disestablishment, anti-disestablishment, anti. Or go to university, go to university, go to university, go to university, gap. You could do it as 8s. Takadimi, 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 tap. That's counting conical. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a but. You could do 9s as well, which is a little bit harder. For 9s, I kind of think of my triplet, which is, I'll slow it down just there. 1 and 2 and dagada 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 dagada. You're counting a triplet on each note of the triplet. 1 and 2 and daddla 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 da. That'll give you a 9. Now all of these can be notated using the tuplet feature. Nice and easy. So if I put a note in, I can then have any tuplet I want. And really it's about understanding what this means. So here we have the amount of notes, and then the amount of notes that they take place within the space of. So this is always going to be 2, 4, or 8. 8 in a bar of 4/4. If you're playing compound time, 12/8 type stuff, then it may be in 3s or 6s, but 2s, 4s and 8s are where you're going to be dealing with this. It's just a case of understanding where they come in. A triplet is 3 notes, 3 eighth notes in the space of 2 eighth notes. When you move up to quintuplets, 5s, that's 5 16th notes in the space of 4. See, 5 16th notes in the space of where 4 would normally lie. Right? If we continue on, 6 again means exactly that. 6 16th notes in the space of where 4 would normally appear. So here's our 4, and here's our 6. Same applies to 7. Now really all you do is you go down to the lowest number. I'll explain what that means in a second. So it's 7 notes in the space of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Andy does establishment, go to university, go to university, go to university, go. Yes, so 7. Now 8 is obviously where we up our game. We don't think I mean, I guess you could write a tuplet in. You could put 8 notes in the space of 4. But why would you do that? Because we know that 8 notes in the space of 4 is remove. Yeah, we know those are 30-second notes. So then any number over 8, when I move on to 9, for example, 9 will be 9 notes in the space of 8 30-second notes. And you can keep going, 10s, 11s, 12s, they all happen. Now, if you want to be a badass, quite why this makes you a badass, I don't know. Counting exercise, call it. If you're into prog, I'm sure you've probably experimented with stuff like this. But really, I should be able to delete that. And I can process this kind of acceleration, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s and 9s. Messed up the 9. I can process that in my mind. Useful skill, maybe, perhaps, maybe not at all. In terms of the final part of your question there, where you ask about what is a group of 6, what's the value, can such groups go across the bar? The answer to can they go across the bar is no. No. We don't even let these go across beats. Simple as that, really. Counting subdivisions, 16 tuplets, is a very complicated subject. Very complicated, and it's something that is probably one of the hardest aspects of me teaching transcription. So we're already at 24 minutes, so I'm probably not going to go on that now. But there is a great article on Steve Vai's website that he had back in the day called Tempo Mental. That's worth reading. Really, it's a case of what I would recommend doing is checking out any transcription and reading what's in it. Like if I look at what did I do? I did Fake Love for a guy earlier. It's one of his own solos. So being able to look at this and process what this means, I can count these rhythms. We've got 6s with a note of rest at the start. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then we've got a group of 7. Da 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 da. You can see a grace note in there, so it's da bra da 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 da. Back to our 6s, da 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 da. Then we've got a group of 3, da 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 ba. Singing like a madman. Anyway, we'll leave that there. So hopefully that transcription FAQ was of use or interest to you. If not, I apologise for taking up 25 minutes of your time. If you have enjoyed that, please do check me out on Patreon, up there somewhere. You can subscribe to me by hitting the button down there, or you can check out some of my videos there and there. Highly recommend it, not just because you'll enjoy them, but because I enjoy sharing my content with people. If you don't want to do any of those things, I guess that's fine too. Hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button, and tell your friends to drop comments, because all of it is appreciated. I've been Levi Clay, much love, and thank you for your support and attention, and I will be back again for another video soon. Bye!